the Russians don't quite have a yacht club like the U.S. has a yacht club.
Welcome to 10-Minute Travels. With me, as always, is Phil Freeman.
And with me, as always, is Shane Patrick. And we are going to talk to Jon Bisson, pilot and adventurer.
Let's get right to it, shall we?
And then when we got to Kamchatka, we pulled into a port called Petropavlosk, Kamchatka. Petropavloski. In that port, that's a Russian submarine base. So when we called to go into that port, they told us we couldn't go in until a Russian submarine was coming out of the port. So we stayed offshore for an extra night, just waiting for that submarine to leave. Once the submarine left, then they cleared us into the port. We got into the port, and we stayed at, believe it or not, the Kamchatka Yacht Club. And I tell you what, the Russians don't quite have a yacht club like the U.S. has a yacht club. But it was interesting. You know, we had these a sailboat next to us that these Russians owned, and it was pretty beat up. And but the nice thing, they were very friendly, and they had a lot of king crabs, and they gave us all the king crabs we wanted. So we had a good time at that yacht club. Beat up docks and everything else, but then the town there's a real small little town, and you know it's very gray. And when I say very gray, you're very bland. You know, I mean Kamchatka is not it's not Moscow. So everything's bland there in Kamchatka. So, and then we met this company that picked us up and had these big ATVs. And we got in the ATVs and we went exploring the, volcanoes, glaciers, and geysers. In fact, we got in Russian helicopters that flew the geysers to look at all these geysers. And I got pictures of all this stuff, going in the geysers, camping out. We camped out in the glaciers for about 5 or 6 days. We spent over a week in Kamchatka. So after we did all the exploration, check out the volcanoes there, the glaciers, the geysers, then we processed out of Kamchatka. Even if we had our Russian visas with us, we didn't plan on going back into Russia. So we processed out of that port, okay, and figured, well, now we're going right to Hokkaido, Japan. So we started sailing to Hokkaido, Japan, and we were really close to Hokkaido, and we got pulled in by the Russian Coast Guard. Well, we got stopped by the Russian Coast Guard or Navy. I don't know if it was Coast Guard or Navy, but it was Russian something, Coast Guard, Navy. And they pulled over to us and told us that we were in their territorial waters and they were going to tow us in. And that was amazing. So, but we had the guy on the boat that spoke Russian, not fluently, but enough to get by. And he explained to the Russian Coast Guard that we had left Kamchatka. And from Kamchatka, we're sailing down the Kuril Islands, and we're going to Hokkaido, and we apologize for being so close to the Russian territory, but we had Russian visas, and we stayed in Russia. So, and we showed it to them, the visas. But I don't think they were any good anymore since we processed it out of Kamchatka. But then they knew that we were in Russia legally, so they let us go. And I'm going, to this day, I go, thank God for that, because the last thing you might be pulled into Russia on a 38-foot sailboat. You don't know what would happen from there. So anyway, from that, we got to Hokkaido, and I spent a couple of days, and I spent a couple of days in Hokkaido. The owner, the captain of the boat, stayed there for about a month or two. But the other thing we did on the way by the Kuril Islands, we stopped by this we stopped at, which we shouldn't have done this, but we stopped at Sakhalin Oblast. It's Sakhalin Oblast, Oblast. And that's a Russian fishing port. We couldn't resist. We pulled in this place. We tied up to the dock, and they had a museum from World War II. We went through the museum, and they had a bunch of rusted Russian boats, all rusted, and they had some submarines all rusted up. And and because this is 2018, but it showed, the financial problems Russia was having at that time, especially in that area. But we stayed there for a couple of days, and we left there. And then they told us there was an island next door, next to this one here, that had American planes that were donated to the Russians for World War II. They were piled up, and I wanted to go see these so bad. And I don't know if they were. I don't know if they were P-38s or what.
Probably P-38s, Air Cobra, right?
Is that P-38?
I think the P-38. No. Air Cobra is like, I forget which one it is.
And that reminds me of another question I had. Why Cobra balls? Why did you have that painted on your plane?
Well, that was the Air Force name, Cobra Ball, Cobraball. And you'll Google it. You'll love it. You'll love it.
But so that's like what they called the model, not like the name of your individual plane. Is that right?
No. The plane was a 707 with a fan jet engines.
Okay.
But the name of the mission and the name of the aircraft itself was called the Cobra Ball.
Okay.
And, in fact, I didn't even think about it. I got a big picture downstairs in my basement. I should have brought it up and showed you the picture, and you see what it looks like. So, but yeah, I mean, it is amazing. And the thing is, the Cobra Ball has a lot of history. Probably about 10 to 15 years before I went to fly the Cobra Ball, there was another plane there called the Rivet Amber, Rivet, Amber, Amber. It was the same plane as the Cobra Ball, and they lost that plane with all the crew members, and nobody knows what happened to it. Out
in the Aleutian Islands somewhere.
In the Aleutian Islands.
Yeah.
But it did the same mission that was during the Cobra Ball. It just disappeared.
Yeah. I mean, I read that book, The 1,000-Mile War.
Yes.
And I was stationed in Akutan for a while, and it's pretty easy to.
You're military?
No, but I had my contract was month on, month off out of Akutan, flying helicopters, and so it's pretty easy to imagine like the planes taking off and then the cloud cover changing, and then they just can't find the island again. And that happened, in that book, they talk about that with a lot of planes, just like never came back.
Oh, yeah. Well, like the Bermuda Triangle and the Bahamas, and in fact, about 3 weeks ago, some pilot, I think he left out of someplace East Coast of Florida, and he went to the Bahamas, and he disappeared. And his wife was waiting for him on the island he was going to. Maybe it was Governor's Harbor or North of Luther, I forget where it was, but he disappeared and they couldn't find him. And then finding his body and the plane about a week later, and believe it or not, he didn't ditch, but he crash landed on a remote island in the Bahamas and died. So, but you know what? At least they found him in his plane. But a lot of pilots disappeared going to the Bahamas. And I fly there quite a bit, but I take every safety precaution I have because I fly single-engine airplanes going to the Bahamas.
Is there a day or a minute that goes by when you're not in your survival suit?
Phil, no, I mean it's all about preparation. It really is. You know that. It's like when we go on a bike trip with you, Phil. I mean we have all the alarms, don't we? You're gonna follow me truck. You've got your what do you call that with the person? You call them up that on the radio, but you got everything. So when I go with you, I know Phil's gonna take care of me. As long as you can pick up the bones and put me in the hospital to take care of me. And thank God for all the biking I've done with you. Nothing that really has happened, except Japan. I did break an ankle in Japan. Oh, by the way, in Japan, when I broke that ankle, when I was on a bike trip with you, I got back to the United States, and I went to the doctor, and I thought it was just a sprained ankle, nothing, or fracture. He goes, John, this ankle's broken. I go, really? And he goes, so they put it in the cast, an inflatable cast. And then I kept on going to see him about my ankle. And I go, can I take this off? And he goes, no, it's going to be several months. And that was right before my trip sailing to Russia. So I told the guys, I'm going on a sailboat at Dutch Harbor to go to Russia and Japan. I can't have this cast on me. Well, John, you shouldn't be going this. I'll leave the cast on, but I'm going. I'm not going to miss this. So I had the cast on at Dutch Harbor. And I was on that sailboat in my survival suit with that cast on. But when I got to Kamchatka, to that place, Petropavlosk, whatever it is, when I got there, you're going to laugh, but I went to this hospital with one of the crew members on the boat, and I went to this house with the front door, walked in, and I had it in my hand. It was a really nice inflatable cast with buttons with inflate and everything else. It wasn't cheap. And I wanted to donate it to them. And they looked at me and they didn't know what to do. They go, no, we don't want that. I go, it's a nice one. Don't you guys need this here? No, they just didn't know what to do. So we walked out of the hospital.
They probably thought it was a sex toy. Freaked them out.
So, but then we walked out and I saw an ambulance parked right there with the windows open. I put it right in the driver's seat.
And the ambulance calls the Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard pulls you over.
The Russian Coast Guard, yep.
Yeah. So John, what was there any other last tidbits when you finished up your sail in Hokkaido? Because stopping off in that random Russian port is just intriguing.
Well, that, and and the other thing about the Kuril Islands, there's a lot of hot springs and geysers here, because I told you there's 157 volcanoes in that area. So without that many volcanoes, you get a lot of hot springs. So I got pictures of me in the hot springs, and I don't want to show it to too many people, but it was enjoyable. I love my hot springs, Phil. So, but it was such a history lesson. And then, and after we left the Bering Sea and we're going to Japan, sailing through the Sea of Oshkosh. Okay.
Osk.
You got it? Yeah. You know what I'm talking about. That sea. We sailed through that. And the one thing that I'll never forget sailing to Japan was all the trash that was in the water. And a lot of trash. And that's the biggest thing sailing that Cabo Rico 38. We'd be hitting logs and stuff and trash in the water all the time. And then we asked some of the ports where all the stuff came from, and they blamed it all on Asia and China. They said, it's not the Japanese, we pick it all up. So, but it was amazing. And then, I studied a little bit about the Kuril Islands, because I was there somewhat, with a couple of the islands. And, Japan owned the closest islands by Hokkaido, northern Hokkaido. In fact, when you and I biked in Hokkaido, remember we pointed out to Russia? Well, when we pointed out to Russia, those first 4 islands belonged to Japan. And they had a peace treaty with Russia, and Russia took everything north of that to keep it, and they kept the 4 islands closest to Japan, and but they lost that after World War II. Russia just took them all. So
yeah, I think I might be off, but I think in the war, I think it was 19, I want to say 4 or 5. There was the Russo-Japanese War, but they got all those islands in the war because they beat the Russians in their own private war. But then the Russians made a point to get them back and more.
Yep, and in fact, there's at the end of the war, I think it was I can't remember the date on it, but shortly after the war ended, they had a peace treaty called the San Francisco Peace Treaty that the Allies and the Russians and the Japanese signed, okay? And that was involved in the Kuril Islands. And Russia didn't sign on that, but basically Japan said, we're going to give up we'll give up the Kuril Islands. We're not going to fight for them back. And they signed that, but the Russians never signed it. So that's why Japan right now is still trying to get them back, because Russia never signed that peace treaty. And believe it or not, if you look at the history of the World War II, but I put so much information on my Apple Mac to read it out to you, and here I am. I guess I got some of it memorized, and I'm just going around and telling you all this stuff. But I tell you, I love the Aleutians. And I think it was General Mitchell. I don't know if you remember who General Mitchell was, but he was a really famous general in World War II. But prior to World War II, he had mentioned that Alaska was probably the best thing that the United States could ever done, because they said Alaska will really control the world for the United States as far as defense. So, it's and when you think about, that when the United States bought Russia, remember that was called somebody's folly. Remember that center? Seward's folly, and nobody laughed about that. But that was probably the best investment the United States ever did. You look how big Russia is now right now, then you look how big Alaska is in the Aleutian Islands. And then when you go down the Aleutian Islands, go all the way down to Attu, there's only one island west of there that the Russians own. But all the Aleutian Islands are all owned by the United States. So, and maybe I'll get it back there someday to go to Attu. I've always wanted to go to Attu. At least I've been to Dutch. I've been to Adak. I've been to, Kiska. And I might get one of your bikes and just get on that ferry and go to Kodiak next.
That was Jon Bisson, pilot and adventurer. If you'd like to learn more about Jon or anything else we do at 10 Minute Travels, please visit 10minutetravels.com. And please like, subscribe, and share this podcast on all the platforms.
And we want to remind you to make sure your sense of humor matches your sense of adventure.